Good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. A very warm welcome to our 14th webinar from CILT International, looking at the impacts of COVID-19, but also strategically into the future. And right at the beginning of 2021, we wanted to start with a real focus on education and learning. So today's webinar is dealing with the importance of learning and people development during and post-COVID. And we have a number of really excellent speakers that have come along to help share their views and perspectives. We'll be on for about an hour and a half, but what we hope is through the first hour or so that you'll be inspired and motivated by the bite-sized sessions that we will have with our panel, and then we will move to a panel discussion, and there's also time for your questions and answers. So with no more ado, let me introduce the panel that we've assembled for you today. First, we're going to hear from Paul Ryder, and Paul holds a senior position with the Bank of China and has a real history of working within the learning and development sphere, and we'll hear more from Paul later. We also have Arnoud Dekkers from 4D Supply Chain, and he's going to bring a bit of commercial perspective around how a consultancy has adapted and really brought a bit of a chameleon effect to looking at the whole training sphere. And then we're going to hear from Fiona Palmer, who is our own learning and development manager at CILT in the UK, and she's going to give her perspective about what's happening here. Last but not least, we also have Jan Steenberg, and Jan has an important role not only as the Honorary Secretary and a trustee of the CILT globally, but he also works and leads the IESC, which is our Education Standards Committee, and that works globally looking at promoting best practice and ensuring that globally our education products and services are working well. So that's the team that we have assembled for you. But before I hand over to Jan and Paul, who are going to kick off, I want to share a little bit about what's been going on within the world of international and to share some of our important feedback from our customer surveys with our training providers. Back in July this year, we shared with you our first education and training webinar, and that was very much looking at the importance of human capital, investing in people, and the wider human resources implications of COVID. However, since then, we've got quite a lot of worldwide evidence that we have been able to build up. So since March, we have had 6 major surveys of our training partners, and that has given us some real insight to some of the do's and the don'ts and the challenges that our overseas providers are facing. Now, to give you a bit of insight, this is where we operate across the world. The gold location tags are where we operate a CILT organization. So that means that there is a CILT country such as CILT Australia, CILT UK, etc. But we also have a number of countries where we also have training partners. And I will just say that this is only the ones that CILT International are involved with. There are, of course, a whole lot more that are powered by our local countries. And for example, CILT UK also operate with partners around the world. But this shows that there is a really good spread in terms of who we've been talking to and who we've been reaching out to. Now let's get to some of the detail. So over the past 10 months, we've heard from 80% of our learning partners around the world. And the response rates have varied depending on the kind of questions we've been asking them. But it's generally been roughly a 25 to 60% feedback rate. And what's good about that is people have not only just focused on the numbers side of things and how their business is doing, but more importantly, they've looked at product need, the way that blended learning and online delivery is now becoming even more critical. And you can see that in the top corner here in March, that gave us our biggest response rate because that's when COVID was really becoming a serious global issue. but there's been consistent feedback and liaison all the way through the rest of the year. Now, we asked back in April time for some metrics around what COVID would mean. And as you would expect, very few people said business as usual. They wanted to move to online and blended solutions. And they also wanted to look away from what we call our core qualifications of diplomas and certificates to more creative ways of learning. And the evidence showed that everyone really had to accelerate and up their game in order to make sure that they were soluble and viable businesses, but also to make sure that the products that were being taken to market were still fit for purpose. Now, as you might expect, there was quite a lot of interest in moving to online webinars, to getting experts on to dealing with some of the challenges that some of the providers had never faced before, and also making sure that the content was really relevant for a very rapidly changing world. We also had to look at assessment because as CILT International, we had really promoted examination as the benchmark of the way that people would be assessed in Africa, India, and so on. But because of COVID, we had to make sure that the quality of what was being assessed was still to standard, but that the methods were not open to failure, issues of plagiarism, issues of making sure that assignments written in one country were of comparable quality to projects in others. So there was quite a significant bit of work that had to be done to altering and blending the assessment terminology. Now, more importantly, we said, now you've been forced to go online, now you've been forced to blend, what does this mean long-term for your learning environment? And this was really quite powerful because it brought out the role not just of online and the different ways that you can communicate, it also meant that mentoring and small group work became increasingly important. And this ties into what Fiona is going to be saying later about wider CPD. This is our latest trend data, and this came out of a survey done in November this year. And it's very clear that there's a real opportunity, but yet a real challenge. So the diagram on the left shows that, yes, there is still a role for a lot of the CILT learning and education to happen. But what you'll see is that there's quite a bit of growth proportionally within the CPD and short course area. But also, there's still a requirement to develop and grow the core qualifications to make sure that people are competent and able to work within supply chain and logistics anywhere in the world. When we looked at the issue of online and self-learning short courses, what's interesting is that we are kind of only touching the surface because many of the new products that have been developed this year, including short courses in soft skills, humanitarian logistics, and other products dealing with supply chain, we can see that statistically there was quite a high interest in diversifying and offering those programs. So bite size and kind of short and sweet courses definitely seems to be a strong theme that is coming forward. So some headlines about what we found in our research are here. So we've seen key growth since March 2020. Interestingly, 31 education providers are on the waiting list for accreditation with CILT. And we are still 20% up on the number of approved partners around the world than we were this time last year. A lot of our partners have moved to blended learning. A lot of partners are now looking to wider market reach. So, for example, in South Africa, looking to the whole Southern Africa area, in Dubai, looking to the whole Gulf region context. Assessment has had to be flexible and will continue to be so. The bite-sized shorter course is where we probably need to focus, but coaching and mentoring, working with that, is a really strong brother-sister relationship that we need to look at. And the final one, and this probably brings us quite nicely now into what we're going to hear from the rest of the panelists, is that it isn't COVID itself that's actually stopped progress. When there's been lockdowns or restricted learning or universities have shut their doors, the online bit and keeping people learning hasn't been a problem. But there's an economic bow wave effect that we're beginning to see. And that's because there's less money in the system, and there's a perception that learning and development, unfortunately, is still a dispensable activity, which therefore then means that people are not being sponsored or have less disposable income to pay for courses privately. Now, that's not general across the world, but what we're finding is there's a certain trend that says, we're now feeling the pinch. And a lot of it will depend on the mentality of the individual and the mentality of the business as to whether or not the real effect of COVID on learning can be overcome. And that's the challenge, I guess, that we're facing today. So with no more ado, I will stop sharing. That sets the scene. And I will hand over to Jan to tell us a bit about Paul.
Thank you very much, John. Good introduction and interesting topic as well. We are a global organization, and I'm always quite impressed when I see the reach that we actually have across the globe. Our 35,000 or so members in about 36 countries. Last time I counted. We are very diverse, and that's great. So is the panel tonight, in some shape or form, at least in terms of where we are currently located. I have great pleasure to introduce Paul Ryder to everyone here on this webinar. Apart from Paul having a very senior role in the Bank of China, he's also a personal friend of mine and has been for quite a number of years. We share a passion for Scotland and all things up there, including the weather and the walks and the whiskey. But Paul's sort of real, I guess, professional quality is, of course, he's heading up the Bank of China's sort of finance academy and has been since 2016. He's based in Shanghai. And I'm sure he can share a lot of his sort of professional experience from that. He came originally from, well, he came before that from HSBC Bank, where he was the head of global learning. So Paul knows a lot about learning, and he knows a lot about education from the financial world. But knowing Paul, I'm sure he can teach us one or two things about how perhaps to think in different ways about learning and education that we can use in our supply chain logistics and transportation profession. So with that, I'll hand over to Paul Ryder.
Thanks, Jan, for the introduction. Yes, I'm very happy to talk to you guys about the Bank of China and learning in the Bank of China. Really what I wanted to do was to address the question of whether COVID has had a positive impact on training or a negative impact on training, which I think sounds like an odd question, beyond the fact that I think in a business like the Bank of China, where we're a little slow to embrace change, that sometimes pressure on the system kind of creates the impetus to kind of move forward and do something different just out of business necessity. So I just have 3 slides really to share to kind of discuss a little bit about what our learning strategy is, how we've embraced the opportunity, which is COVID, to move our training forward, and kind of what's changed and what I think the implications will be in the future. John, could I move on to the next slide, please? I mean, this is really by way of background, really. Trading in China, is very different, I think, than in the Western markets. There's a premium from the Chinese government in terms of building professionalization. So China generally has a policy of how we move Chinese citizens up the value chain. So they're moving out of more routine, systematic jobs into jobs where they're kind of creating value through the knowledge and the application of that knowledge. So you can imagine that the state-owned industries like the Bank of China all now have a significant focus on how they train and how they build professionalization through their system. I think that's probably an easy thing to say. China tends to come from a very practical orientation towards training. So we often follow the school system. Our training can be very knowledge-based, not very behaviorally based. Certainly when I came to China 5 years ago, we would be putting people in front of a lecturer for half a day or a day and then giving them an exam, and we felt that was, supporting kind of business performance. We were, though, and still are, I think, very good at bringing groups of people together to solve real business problems and then implementing the solution from that. So kind of training as a workshop. Really, though, the challenge for the banks like the Bank of China is how you begin to perceive training much more in driving business performance, and what are some of the challenges that we kind of face in terms of getting there. So this first slide really is an outtake of our strategy. We have a general view that from a minimum requirement point of view, that training has to drive business performance, or it should be driving long-term professionalism of our staff. We have a view that we should be able to apply that training in a systematic way anywhere in the world. So if you take a corporate relationship manager in Shanghai, can we train them pretty much the same way in London, New York, Paris, or indeed Beijing? We expect the training to be cost efficient, so delivered to populations where we get kind of the most economic leverage from deploying that training. So into high risk role, into high value adding roles, or perhaps into roles which can contain cost or redesign organizational processes, or to talent populations. And we ensure that the training is aligned with driving the key elements of our strategy. So I think anybody who works in a large corporation would have the same sorts of goals for their training system. Really, our long-term view, though, is that if you go to kind of bullet point 4, really, that training should happen in work and not in our colleges. So it should be performance orientated. Our employees should be able to draw it down when they have a real challenge, and it should support performance in the here and now. And I guess if you ask us in the long term, we would say, well, in a world where we can monitor the tone of customers' voices over the telephone, we can see whether they're stressed. We can see maybe whether therefore that stress is indicating that they may be fraudulent customers. How does an employee respond to that? And can we offer them in the moment kind of virtual training or virtual guides that will kind of help them deal with problematical customers? You kind of get this trend really, which is training in the colleges, which is very heavily face-to-face, through to a vision which is as much training as possible should be real time within a learning culture within the context of doing our job. So then we sort of have some principles that we're working towards. So if we come from an organization which is 100% lecture based, we will move probably to almost 0 lectures if we could, but we very focused on experiential learning. So for the majority of our advanced training curricula, we're somewhere between 60 and 80% experiential learning and not listening to people like me talking all the time. We're 20% social learning, and we minimize lectures to around 10%. It could be slightly more than that. And then, of course, we have the strategy, which is to impact real performance. And for us, that kind of means shortening face-to-face training and moving more activity online, so that we're focused on embedding an application in work and the continual learning in work. And we feel that in order to do that, we have to tailor our learning to individual learning needs. And we have different learning journeys based on learning need, not just kind of general curricula that we apply to everybody. And really, we would favor virtual learning where people can draw down key learning modules in the time which is most convenient to them. Either they have a work problem or they're on the metro here in Shanghai, and that learning might be bite-sized. It might be 10 minutes, it might be 15 minutes, but really it's around a customer-centric approach to learning. So that's directionally where we believe we're heading. Of course, our problem pre-COVID was the business kind of likes face-to-face training. So we would often run face-to-face training programs for 4 weeks. So again, not like the West, a significant amount of time in face-to-face training, and with a genuine struggle actually to move the business away from its love of face-to-face training to having more and more virtual elements that we felt as training professionals in the Bank of China could enhance the effectiveness of our training and make them more learner-centric and have a bigger impact on people's kind of individual work performance. So this shift from training in a college to training in work with the right tools available that will support the embedding and transfer of that activity. I mean, that's generally our strategy in the problem statement. John, if I could have the next slide, and then just let me say where COVID kind of got us to. So my distinction here is kind of obviously pre-COVID or post-COVID, what really happened. So in China, we cancelled face-to-face training pretty much from the end of Chinese New Year last year through till April or May. And since then, really, we've been able to run face-to-face training again. And actually, I cancelled training in Shanghai until after Chinese New Year again, as there's been a kind of an uptick in northern China in COVID cases. So we're trying to be responsive and flexible around what we're able to do given the COVID situation. But if you can kind of look at some of the things which have genuinely changed from our point of view, we've been able to cut lengthy face-to-face curricula with a limited focus on embedding to actually kind of running face-to-face training, but having more virtual training before that face-to-face training starts, with a more significant focus on kind of embedding activity. And indeed, for some curricula that we would run face-to-face here in China, especially with international vendors, we've moved completely online. So for instance, we run a program which is about 4.5 days with international vendors speaking about risk training. That training program has all been modularized, which I can't say. It runs still in classes of 40. it runs predominantly through case studies about breaches in financial crime practice in the West and here in China, and is run in an interactive, discursive way with actually one module a week as opposed to kind of 4.5 days kind of straight training. But the feedback actually on that training program virtually is stronger than it is face-to-face within the classroom. And the embedding activity that's kind of followed on from it is also seen as moving Bank of China policy kind of further forward. I think actually for us though that a lot of e-learning was just kind of pushed online without, and you know, the rationale was always we could systematically target 300,000 people, but really it's not what we wanted to do. So it was put online for cost, or it's put online to make training available to groups of people that we weren't going to invest in a face-to-face situation. That sort of training modality changed very, very quickly for us. We piloted actually in a very Chinese way, I think, some live lectures where we would have up to 1,000 people listening. But very, very quickly learned that we could run experiential learning through a virtual channel. And we moved heavily towards case study, simulations, conversational training, where we would use facilitation online through facilitated discussions. It kind of interesting to kind of watch the shift and seeing people's engagement in virtual live learning. And then of course that allowed us to be more focused when we applied static learning online to support different elements of the learning journey. So that shift has been remarkable. Actually, it's had a significant impact on the positive way in which kind of people are experiencing learning within the bank. Learning needs analysis for us was often a quick interview with a boss, or actually, if we were serious about the training, it would often be lengthy face-to-face workshops, often significant amounts of questionnaires going out into the business. Again, COVID's allowed us to run virtual design thinking, learning needs analysis workshops. So we have a leadership program, or a series of leadership programs that will roll out to all staff. The design of those programs was run through half-day design thinking workshops, which identified the business challenges that could be solved by leadership, the behaviors that we thought were important, and started to identify the different learning types that we had kind of internationally here in China, indeed across different Chinese provinces. And so our ability to respond nimbly around training design has gone up particularly quickly. We have let's give you just an interesting observation. We have some research which has designed a capability framework for leadership, which is run out of Beijing. It's taken, in a very Chinese way, I think, lots of in-depth interviews. It's taken nearly 12 months to develop. The behavioral framework that we train in our leadership training program was developed over, pretty much over 6 weeks, from first conversation with the CEO through to the first learning journey design through virtual design thinking. So actually the agility of the learning team for key projects has kind of increased. I think the next point is also important. The virtual learning has allowed us to look at a range of different online tools that support learning and support either continual learning or embedding. I think John mentioned this earlier. A real desire from the team to use micro-learning. So kind of they want bite-sized training, which is supporting ongoing learning or is helping solve an individual problem. Lots of success with online case studies and discursive discussions, knowledge sharing in many ways about what the Bank of China have done, or what other businesses globally or in China have done to solve specific business problems, and then kind of real short form, kind of like how-to guides or checklists when somebody's facing a particular business problem. So this ability to focus on learning beyond the classroom in a way which aligns with our principles about learning and further supports kind of performance in the here and now has had a significant impact. The Bank of China, until COVID, actually, has dabbled with things like action learning in the past with kind of poor results. And what COVID has allowed us to do is to focus much more systematically on action learning projects and groups of people working together to solve real problems as part of their core training curricula. So we have training through or action learning projects to look at solving real leadership challenges, how we better service our customers, how we support digitization. They tend to be either facilitated with internal or external coaches, or indeed we'll bring people together, relationship managers together, to solve sales challenges, how we build share of wallet, how we solve customer satisfaction issues, and those projects are being implemented consistently across the bank, again to support significant commercial performance returns or better risk management outcomes for us. John, sorry, just the last slide, please. So this is kind of much more what our training would look like today for the critical roles that we've begun to focus on. So if what I said to you before COVID was that we sort of had a relationship management training course, would be 3 or 4 weeks, a lot of face-to-face training, but kind of a focus on lecturing. This is a current proposal. This isn't live yet, but it covers pretty much what our leadership, for instance, learning journey would look like. And kind of what you'll see is the shift from face-to-face training. So we still support face-to-face training for key activities, for instance, solving some of the critical business challenges together, or behavioral skills where we think we kind of need practice. And then we have this much greater shift into embedding and on-the-job learning, which allows us to either personalize the learning journey through reading and ebooks, and actually occasionally through some webinars. We have groups of people working together on solving real business problems, and we have lots of kind of micro learning that supports additional elements of the curricula. So this curricula now from end to end would look like it's about 3 months with 5 days face-to-face, and maybe a commitment of 2 or 3 hours a week for the 3 months that kind of moves further forward. The advantage of this is we're able to deploy at scale, and we're able actually to deploy anywhere in the world. And so, sadly, it sometimes takes a shock to the system to allow you to kind of make some significant strides forward. But actually, that's exactly what COVID's done. It's enabled us to focus almost exclusively on how we can bring virtual learning to life, how we can bring performance support to life, and how we can do that in a way which supports individual learning journeys and on-the-job learning. And I think at that point I'm going to run out of time, so I'll be quiet and I'll hand back over to Jan to introduce the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Great stuff, and interesting to hear how a large organization like Bank of China has made the transition from, I guess, more traditional sort of classroom-based training and education to very personalized and online sort of education, which is the kind of an experience I've had in my professional life as well. With that, I'll hand over to Arnoud Dekkers. And Arnoud, looking forward to hear what you have been doing.
Thank you. While Arnoud is just setting that up, just an additional factor, you heard me mention that despite of COVID, we've been able to welcome 20 new training partners into CILT approval in the last year or so. 4D Supply Chain is one of those organizations, and Arnoud's going to share a very different perspective, which is looking at how consultancy has responded to very much this bite-sized demand and how they have been lean and agile in doing that. Thanks, Arnoud. Over to you.
Hey, thank you, John. Thanks for the introduction. And hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I hope everyone is well and safe. Today, I want to discuss with you a very interesting topic on how the training and consultancy sector has adapted and changed its approach. However, I need to start off first with a short company introduction on 4D Supply Chain Consulting, which can also be referred to as 4D for short. We're an independent logistics and supply chain consultancy company established in September of 2019. However, the idea and concept behind establishing a consultancy firm has been in the making for the last 5 years with the wider Dekkers group, offering globally an experienced consulting team with the ability to support in key focus industries such as oil and gas, power, wind and mining, where we see major CapEx and OpEx initiatives heavily relying on transparent and adaptive supply chains. Our client services range from supply chain support to manpower provisions, and that include both competence development as well as training. Focusing on the training, we offer a range of supply chain and logistics training courses, both online and classroom training, where we cover high-risk technical topics delivered by industry experts. Now, leveraging on our industry experts with years of experience in the project logistics and freight forwarding arena, I must highlight the origins of 4D and explain briefly about the wider group. Dekkers was established in 1924. We have approximately almost nearly 100 years of experience in the project logistics and freight forwarding arena. As you can see on the slide, Dekkers Group is comprised of 4 independent companies. We have Dekkers, which is the project freight forwarding, D-Tech, transport and marine engineering, D-Ship, ocean transport of break bulk and heavy lift project cargo, and D-Haulage, dealing with heavy haulage equipment management. So with approximately 1,300 employees working in Dekkers, we have an international global reach with 70 offices in more than 40 countries worldwide. So if you're wondering how we move it, we have got something in mind. This has been part and parcel of our existence and success as a group to deliver highly specialized freight forwarding, as well as innovative project logistics solutions around the world. However, with that being said, how do you continuously improve the quality and the efficiency of operations? How do you increase job satisfaction? How do you increase employee motivation, increase to adopt new technology, and most importantly, build confidence in your workforce? This is done by continuous professional development. Now, focusing our attention to the quote on the slide, importance of continuing professional development should not be underestimated. It is a career-long obligation for practicing professionals. Now, this quote, it resonated with me. It is indeed important to continue our professional development and our journey as working professionals to both acquire the skills and knowledge of our trade. So I find it very interesting to see companies cutting costs when it comes to training of their employees. The world hasn't stopped, because of the pandemic. Yes, we've slowed down, but we still exist. And as we have done for years, we've adapted to change in our environment. So with a majority of people working from home, CPD courses becomes even more important. So why are we cutting costs when it comes to professional development? Just looking at the benefits through CPD courses, we can ensure our knowledge stays relevant and up to date. We maintain and enhance our knowledge and skills to deliver professional services. Focused CPDs opens us up to new possibilities, new knowledge, as well as new skills. But most importantly, our capabilities keep pace with the current benchmark of others within the same field. It remains a fact to this day that employees continue to contribute to the success of the company. And so with a year of cost cutting and reducing the expenditure for training, we may see some serious repercussions in the near future, from ineffective staff management, increased business expenses, to reduced productivity. Looking on the internet, recent surveys show that companies continue to struggle with the skills gap. So despite so many people being out of work, 87% of employers say that they are struggling to fill positions as a result of a skills gap. And they mentioned that a third of the candidates expect the employer to train the workers versus 19% of the employers who said that they should be responsible themselves. So self-development and training is important to deliver that long-term sustainable change for the new normal. Now, why are we in the training space? Now, obviously, knowledge is power. And as one of the big players in the project logistics and freight forwarding arena, we've been providing training to our employees since the group was established in 1924. And as mentioned in my previous slide, with approximately 1,300 employees in the business, the importance of continuous professional development has been key to our success and our long, rich history. It has formed a part of our culture and ensures our people have had a competitive edge in their skill set. For many years, we've actually been developing talent in-house. One of our programs, which is the Dekkers Most Promising, DMP for short, is a unique training program whereby we select young talent from around the world to work on international projects and gain an invaluable logistics experience. These DMPs, they spend 2 years in a program rotating every 3 months between offices with a selection, as I mentioned, of 40 countries worldwide. So it only made sense to include training in our consultancy offering for external clients. Now, this is what Paul also alluded to in the webinar just recently passed, but now moving away from the traditional delivery of training, which was previously done either in a classroom setting or the job with supervisors, and you had more experienced employees, which to this day remains a very important handover of skills. However, that historic ideology of face-to-face training was put to the test during COVID. Online training rapidly became the new normal and continues to set pace within various industry verticals. COVID saw this market changing and evolving ever so quickly, and we experienced a growing interest in people wanting access to bite-sized micro-credential short courses. So previously, online learning was optional. However, due to COVID, those who preferred to learn in a classroom setting were now forced to adapt to learning online, and lo and behold, they quickly discovered the advantages of learning online. You can learn what you want. You don't need to sit down in the classroom for hours. You can do it from the comforts of your home. Online courses look good on your resume, and it shows your employers your commitment to continue learning. You can learn at your own pace, and most importantly, costs are significantly lower. So we need to be realistic here. people are going to continue to rely on the internet for self-development and knowledge. It is a fact that I can learn most general things just from YouTube. So when I look at our industry, the supply chain logistics industry, we noticed there was a gap in online bite-sized interactive e-learnings. And leveraging the wealth of knowledge from the Dekkers group, we decided to adapt and change our approach to the training by offering online interactive bite-sized courses. And one of our first courses that we created was the Incoterms 2020 Made Easy. We obviously knew that Incoterms rules were going to change on the 1st of January 2020. And so therefore we found that there was a need to circulate a product whereby working professionals and students would have access to an interactive product. Obviously, the official endorsement of our Incoterms 2020 product by CILT is an exceptional recognition for us. And we are very excited to be offering globally a recognized CILT endorsed product. This course is suitable for everyone, including students in the transport and logistics sector, contracting and procurement professionals, logistics specialists, as well as freight forwarders. And anyone that completes the course and passes the final assessment receives a CILT endorsed certificate of completion. We can only hope that in the near future, businesses around the world adopt these type of certified trainings as prerequisites for job profiles, ensuring that there's a level of knowledge offered to the participants at a global standard. Now, here I just wanted to give you guys a bit of a sneak peek of the 4 modules that would need to be completed prior to the assessment. It was important for us to make the online courses innovative as well as interactive. Learning should be fun and exciting. Unlocking one module prior to being able to move on to the next provides that accomplished stage feeling, and at each stage, you'll be able to watch a video, learn interactively, and complete checks. So ultimately, learning that attracts the attention becomes more memorable. Now, lastly, and circling our way back around to the main, once again to the main topic, another example of how we've adapted and changed our approach, and highlighting the needs for e-learning courses, we had a fantastic opportunity to partner up with the University of Houston, the supply chain and logistics program, to provide short certificates, micro credentials to their students and industry partners. So having approached University of Houston, and after the initial discussions with them, we quickly saw or realized that there was an opportunity to provide online short micro credential courses to support their student development. And however, we decided after a few conversations to take it one step further. And in addition to the certificate, we offer as well a digital badge, which provides participants a new way to promote their progress and understanding of specific topics. The digital badge you can see on the screen can be used in email signatures as well as on social media to paint a complete picture of a participant's skills and their achievements. The idea here is that these badges can be compiled into online participant portfolios for students and can showcase out-of-class learning achievements that have been awarded. In addition, the digital badges will indicate the student's individual success, the abilities and skills, as well as it demonstrates to employers their drive to engage in salient global topics for professional development. The e-learning with the University of Houston was launched in fall of 2020, and to date we've received an exceptional feedback from the students and working professionals alike. So given that success rate, we are already in very advanced discussions to release multiple additional online e-learnings, micro-credentials over the course of this year. Thanks for your time. I think that is my 15 minutes or 12 minutes. Thanks for your time. I hope I've sparked your interest in the self-development as well as our e-learning course. And I hope to have provided you with some insight on how we've adapted and changed our approach to training. And I hope to answer any questions that will come up in the Q&A later. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Arnoud. And obviously, if anyone is interested in hearing about what has been going on in a bit more detail, we can make Arnoud's contact details available to you. Let's move on. It's been a bit of a CILT sandwich session, so you've heard the strategic international view at the beginning. We really want to circle back now and come back to the really important subject around mentoring and professional development, and in particular how CPD fits in. I think all speakers have alluded to this, and they've all alluded to the bite size and going on a journey that fuels your own competence rather than sitting doing long periods of study in a classroom. So Fiona, you're our last speaker. Fiona has been working with the Institute, I think, nearly about 10 years now. And Fiona's going to talk to us from a UK perspective around the important work they're doing on CPD and mentoring. Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks, John. Yeah, hi, for having me as well. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what CPD is. I know Arnoud obviously touched on this before, and I think that kind of segues quite nicely into what I'm going to be talking about anyway. So yeah, I'm the Learning and Development Manager at CILT UK, and I'm just going to talk about what our approach to CPD actually kind of looks like as an institute. So let's just hope this goes to the next one. Hey, so CPD is a commitment that people need to go through, and is an integral part of being a professional. As Arnoud kind of said earlier, it's continuing professional development. So it's about, no matter where you are in your career, CPD is relevant to you. It's described as the systematic maintenance and improvement of knowledge, skills, and competence throughout a professional's working life. So that's really important, that you don't think, oh yeah, I've done everything. You haven't. There's still more things coming. There's things that you need to discover. It's important to note that we use the word continuing as it is ongoing. So just make sure that you kind of latch onto that. Some people find the idea of CPD a daunting prospect that must be adhered to, as opposed to a developmental opportunity that permeates through many activities that you actually do on your day-to-day jobs, or even, as Arnoud mentioned earlier, watching videos on YouTube. That counts as CPD. As a leading professional institute, we have made a strong commitment to CPD, and all members are expected to adopt the philosophy as part of their own career paths. In the UK, a commitment to CPD is a key contributor to seeking to attain and retain designation, as well as upgrade to higher levels of membership as well. I'm just going to go on to the next one. That's not moving. There we go. So on this slide, you can see kind of what CPD is. It's a myriad of different activities, some that are structured and some that are more experiential. So the key to effective CPD is the relevancy of the activity to your career and your goals, or your projects that you're currently working on as well. There are many activities that would contribute to CPD, and we've laid out a few examples on here. So you can see structured CPD will have learning objectives and methods incorporated into them to ensure that the learning is understood and retained. In terms of structured CPD, you'd be looking at things like academic qualifications from level 1 right up to level 8, from award to diploma as well. And it applies to professional qualifications too, and apprenticeships. It would also include like online courses, e-learning or online classrooms, as well as short courses or learning streams when face-to-face is more accessible in the future. It can also be a blend of all of these approaches as well. So experiential CPD tends to be more ad hoc. There is an element of self-discovery when applying the CPD. The key to experiential learning is the development of a skill through reflection. So what did you learn from that article that you read? What techniques could you apply from the webinar that you've just been on? It's taking what you've learned, what you've seen, what you've read, and actually going through the application process. I think in Arnoud's presentation, there was a cycle which we adhere to as well within CILT in terms of what a CPD cycle looks like. And it should be, you assess where you're at, you do what you need to fill this gap, and then you assess how you're going to actually apply that within your learning as well. And so there are many more CPD activities that exist and are listed on this slide, but the key is its relevance to how you apply it. This is how CPD not only benefits the individual, but the organisation as well, or indeed the profession at large. So just keep that in mind. It's not just about you, it's how you can apply that within your working practice and actually help innovation within your own organisation. So last year, CILT released the Competency Framework, and this helps individuals in the logistics, transport and supply chain professions identify the skills, knowledge and experience they need to develop to continue on their career journey. The whole Competency Framework is available on CILT UK website, so if you get a chance, you can just go on there and have a look at what those competencies actually are and where they sit within each set. So the framework represents 3 areas of competency. So you've got your personal effectiveness in the middle here, and then you've got the core workplace competencies in the gold ring, and the technical competencies, which are more supply chain, logistics and transport focused in the purple ring on the outside. So personal effectiveness includes aspects such as integrity, ethics, influencing and reliability. These competencies aren't exclusive to the workplace, but they are highly valuable to employers as they are often quite challenging to teach and assess in a role. The core workplace competencies are the transferable skills, so they're required across any profession or sector, and they can be contextualized to specific professions and roles. There are 3 core workplace competency sets, so they're efficiency, quality and risk, leadership management and engagement, and data and technology. Then within the technical competencies, these are specific to the skills and knowledge and experience required across the logistics, transport and supply chain operations. And we've expressed this through the 6 competency sets you can see here, including handily a bespoke technical competency, which is kind of our get out of jail free card. So these are heavily influenced by the sector. And examples of this would kind of be like licenses that you're required to drive a vessel or operate within your specific area as well. And so how do you apply these competencies to your job roles or career pathways? We've set 3 competency types within the competency framework, and they're awareness, operational and strategic. These relate to how you apply these competencies in the workplace within the context of your activity. So no one would need to know each competency they possess at a strategic level. So it's important to recognise whether your competence in a specific area needs to sit awareness, operational or strategic. To understand this contextually against academic levels, they've also been mapped into the framework for clarity. And by utilising this chart, you can determine the workplace application required of a specific competency. So you've got like your basic knowledge, you perform with supervision, you perform without supervision, you're experienced at leading this skill set, you influence change in strategic direction, or you actually influence leadership within the actual sector. So utilising the competency framework, CILT UK have given individuals the tools to help them recognise their areas of development and how this could impact on their CPD plan as well. So what have CILT actually done to help people access CPD in COVID? It's been pretty tough time, as I'm sure everyone can appreciate. So in the UK, we've tried to cover a multitude of approaches to CPD before we went into lockdown and had to work from home and no one could actually come and visit us. So many things have remained consistently available to our members, such as Focus magazine and the important articles that provides. The Knowledge Centre, which is our library full of books and articles and journals, has always been available, but a lot of the content was already online as well, where we had electronic databases that people could access. However, in response to COVID, many things have had to adapt and change. So within our awarding organisation, we implemented online proctoring of our regulated qualifications. So this allowed the assessment to continue and ensured the credibility and security of those qualifications as well. The CILT Learning Centre continued to provide our distance learning qualifications, but we did trial a new way of delivering our Transport Manager Certificate of Professional Competence, or CPC, which is a qualification required to be a transport manager in Great Britain. We delivered this through e-learning content and online classrooms to great success, and we've also built on this to deliver refresher training as well. This was important to the UK and its members to ensure logistics and passenger transport operations could still operate and remain compliant, because it is a required qualification to actually be a transport manager in Great Britain. And so we really needed to make sure that we were still offering that out. Within our professional standards team, we've also released a few e-learning courses and are working directly with organisations to supplement their own training capabilities through different and safe approaches. And this is in line with the Competency Framework as well. Our regions and forums team has successfully transposed face-to-face meetings and seminars into webinars, which have been well received and ignited an increase in activity. Our media content has also been affected by COVID, prompting us to produce our Hidden Heroes series, which is a series of special reports from CILT and ITN that showcase how the logistics and transport profession have responded to the global pandemic. So all in all, CILT UK have reacted as swiftly as we could to the pandemic to ensure that members still had CPD activity that was relevant and accessible to them. One strain of activity that didn't necessarily have to change too much was our mentoring program. Oh, no, gone too far. So our mentoring program was updated in 2019, which is not last year anymore, it's the year before. And it utilises the GROW model as its spine so that the relationship is focused for both the mentor and the mentee. So the GROW model is setting goals, so identifying what you want to actually physically do, understanding the reality of where you currently are, identifying the options that are available to you, and having the will to actually physically get out there and do it, or even the resources to get out. So it requires both mentors and mentees to fill out a form about themselves so appropriate matches can be made. Matches range from sector-specific goals to looking to develop softer skills such as networking. Potential mentors are enrolled on an e-learning course. So this is to ensure that they understand their role within the relationship, and it provides a backbone of mentoring techniques that they can apply in their mentor meetings as well. Both mentors and mentees are offered guidance through 2 packs. Pack 1 introduces the mentoring scheme and how it works, and pack 2 is given to them when they're ready to proceed and is more about the practicalities of the mentoring relationship. The responsibility of the mentoring relationship is placed with the mentee, but CILT are on hand should anyone have any issues or require guidance as well. The only way that we've really been affected by COVID is that the mentoring meetings themselves obviously are not taking place face-to-face at the moment. So we've advised people not to meet, but to use alternative means. So whether that's going through Skype or Zoom or any other platform similar to that. We've even had some that are just doing it through email because individuals didn't have the right bandwidth to actually create that. So we try not to be too prescriptive about how people actually form those relationships and what they look like. But what we do ask is that people keep logs of what they're doing. And this way we can ascribe CPD to those mentoring relationships as well. And really it's all about achieving that goal. So yes, the mentee gets CPD because they're looking at how they can achieve that goal, but it's also CPD for mentors as well, as they're learning how to communicate and possibly also doing a bit of a reverse mentoring aspect within those relationships as well. So I've kind of whizzed through that, but essentially what we're kind of looking at is that CPD is important to both individuals and industry. The fact that the individual is developing helps innovate processes. They can identify what might need to change and look at those continuous improvement aspects as well. There's always many different ways of people to actually get into CPD as well. It's similar to what Paul was saying earlier, where some people just see it as learning through face-to-face, but actually you can get that experiential learning from doing things very, very differently to how they used to be done pre-COVID. I think people are more open to that now, and that has been, I don't want to say a benefit of COVID, but it kind of is. And importantly, the message is that CILT are here to support the industry, but also the individuals and the profession at large as well. So everyone should not feel shy about contacting us about how we can help you develop your CPD. That's me done. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Fiona, for rounding that off around the professionalism and the importance of how professional bodies can help in general. While you've been speaking, there's been a flurry of Q&A that's been going on. And just before I hand to Jan really to deal with our last 15 minutes before we wrap up with some closing thoughts, there's a couple of questions that have come up that I think have relevance for everybody. So if you go to the questions and answers, you'll see that Paul and Jan and others have been busy answering the questions one by one. One important thing I just want to pick up, which seems to be a fairly common theme, is around how CILT centrally, if I can use that word, so international and working with the other branches and territories, can really tackle this online issue. I think the short answer to this is that we are looking at the options at the moment. A lot of this also depends on bringing together the competency framework and the model that Fiona shared earlier, alongside the CILT UK and the international program. So there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes looking at that issue at the moment. We do have distance learning, and that has been available historically for quite some time. But I think this step change in the online experience, in being able to directly access bite-sized learning, is a point well made by many of you. We'll obviously be progressing with the technical webinar series, so certainly for the next 6 months and hopefully beyond. The COVID webinars, as we've called them, may morph into something slightly different, but certainly the international best practice webinars will continue as a theme, and we're obviously looking to diversify the titles of those. So if anyone has any suggestions around issues, I'm sure that Keith Newton, our Secretary General, will be delighted to hear from you if you have any ideas. So I think that there are some headline issues here around global access to learning. Our research that we did in November does pick up on very specific courses and needs. And in the time we had today, we haven't been able to share the master list, but we do have a list of around about 20 courses that are either in production or already available that we feel will be of benefit to our global family. So with no more ado, Jan, we've seen some questions in the chat, and also there's some general questions for the panel as well. So over to you.
Thanks, John, and thanks to the presenters for their contributions. Some very very interesting stuff, and I think thought-provoking questions, as well as, I guess, experiences we've all had in the last almost 12 months since COVID. The COVID outbreak sort of really started towards the end of January, and the whole world sort of changed. A lot of us, I'm sure, have been working from home, and I was talking to a friend of mine about that, and he was sort of complaining about working from home. It was hard and difficult, and kids and dogs and all sorts of things. And I said to him, well, you know what, you need to appreciate two things about working from home. Number one, you got a job. Number two, you got home. So with that as a starting point, you know, maybe it's time to sort of appreciate that you are in a much better situation than many other people are out there in that big world. And I think that is kind of reflected as well in the approach to learning, isn't it? And I'd like to sort of ask the panel in terms of the shift that we've seen or are seeing, because it's still kind of in progress, from more traditional ways of learning to more online learning. One of the difficult things, of course, which we're struggling with a bit in CILT is around how do you actually deliver customized online learning to people? And secondly, how do you then assess the work that they do while being sure that they are in fact the people who answered those questions and not someone else who's been sitting next to them while they did the test or filled in the form or whatever they did, produced the essay. So I don't know who wants to pick up on that first.
I suppose it depends on what approach people actually take to their learning. So we've been working with organisations quite closely in what they're looking to do, and we tailor that to their organisation a little bit more than to necessarily the individual. And the way that we try and make, especially now, we've had a few instances where we've done a blended approach where we've put people on an e-learning course so they get the technical information that they need. We've then done an online classroom where they have that interaction, where they can speak with a tutor and understand and ask questions about anything that they've learned in the e-learning. And what we've also looked at doing is setting a task that they then go away and do and then report back on to our tutors that they can talk it through and see where that comes from. In terms of like more formal things such as qualifications, we've had a few people that are quite scared of doing it online, and we're trying to tackle that at the moment. And we're going to be making a video about how, yes, it is secure. This is what you've got to do. You show that your room is empty. If there's any something that pops up in the background, then that will be flagged and that will be addressed with you later. So there are ways that we can make sure that that individual is actually answering those questions as well. But yeah, that's it from our perspective.
No, good point, Fiona. Arnoud, what do you think?
Just a quick one, just a quick comment on this. From the short courses, micro credentials, which are the ones that are approximately 1 to 3 hours, it's very difficult to really assess someone right thereafter unless they haven't passed, of course. If they pass and if somebody else is doing it or looking over their shoulder and assisting them, it's very difficult to survey that, to see what they're actually doing. But we've been having some couple of discussions with various universities worldwide with regards to creating these type of short courses and then having, as Fiona mentioned earlier, having these additional homeworks to go with it, and that would be that checkpoint if something has been done and reviewed by that particular student or working professional. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, and just to add to that, because as you say, as an international family, we are quite diverse. I think the secret is in what I call the wraparound. So you've got the core knowledge or the thing that you're trying to convey, whether that's through online, whether it's through focus cluster webinars, whatever. And then there's the wraparound about how you actually embed it and assess it. And at the moment, we have kind of a bit of a culture gap between, on the one hand, employers that are looking for people that have done CLT programs, and what they perceive is that they have the knowledge and the competence and they can almost go straight into a job and deliver and be economically active and useful from day one. So that's expectation over here. Expectation over there is some countries and cultures prefer the face-to-face learning. So it is structured very much face-to-face. And it's reliance 100% on exam assessment, which goes down to how you are on the day. So within those polls, you've got to try and get a happy medium that means that the assessment is fair, but also make sure that employers see the value of CILT because it is producing knowledge and competence. And that is where it feeds, a square between the eyes with the competency framework that Fiona outlined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then absolutely, and I accept that, and good comments from everyone. I guess another question for me is, have companies and organizations actually cut back on their education budgets, or have they just found a more effective and efficient way of delivering learning because they had to find some other way of doing it through COVID?
I mean, from our experience, I wouldn't say that we've necessarily, I think people are taking stock of where they are at the moment, so they're maybe not necessarily spending that their learning and development budget on a knee jerk. At the moment, they're assessing, and because they're going to have to be using people to develop new skills as well, they're going to have to think about what it is they need to develop as well. So it's doing that analysis of what are the skills that are needed now, especially, and also with less resource as well. So we're not necessarily seeing people cutting back on the budget. It's more people thinking more methodically about what they actually need to implement from a learning and development perspective.
Paul, what's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I mean, HR functions normally have a percentage of kind of total salary as their learning budget. I think the businesses which are being strategic recognise that they're running into a whole raft of issues of upskilling staff and the half-life of knowledge being increasingly short, and lower skilled roles kind of going, and people having to convert across into higher value roles in the value chain. So whilst I think we would all recognise there's a downward pressure on learning expenditure and a need to spend more efficiently, which I think is kind of the point that Fiona alluded to. I think the businesses which are being more strategic are recognising actually there's an enormous deficit in terms of learning to support their future talent resourcing needs. So you know, I hope, and it is a hope, that people are at least holding on to their budgets and seeking efficiency as opposed to cancelling their budgets. Actually, here in China, budgets are absolutely unaffected by COVID, given the need to reprofessionalise.
Arnoud, what do you say? What are you seeing in your organisation?
Yeah, I agree with both Fiona and Paul's comments, but also I'd like to put a little spin on it, actually. But due to so obviously you've got these businesses that are saving costs and cutting on training, and that's because obviously the financial resources are being diverted elsewhere. But because these jobs are currently at risk, that may also encourage individuals to invest and upskill themselves. Yeah? Right? It might not be just from the employer's perspective.
No, that's a very interesting point, and yeah, don't get me started on that one. Yeah, I work in consulting as well, but no, it is a good point. Absolutely. Good. All right. And I guess last but not least, we have a few minutes left. One thing that sort of I'm quite interested in is we've changed our learning and our learning processes, companies, organizations alike. And that's sort of for people who have been used to one form of learning and now learning a different way of learning. What about the new employees that we bring in, the graduates who are coming out, allegedly, and presumably from universities and colleges and wherever, into our profession? What's their learning expectations? Are they completely different from us old-timers who've been used to classroom learning and getting qualifications and so on and so forth? What are your thoughts on that?
I like where you're going with this, Jan. Every company at the moment has a path of digitalization, right? And we have to keep in mind, obviously, the most important focus that we have for 2021 is what does the workplace look like in the future? Yeah, and although technology does define the workplace does not define the workplace for the future, I still feel that it might become a critical element, and it will allow organizations to attract the right talent Yeah, it will bridge that physical and that digital workspace, and it will also appeal to workers of different generations. Yeah? So ultimately, the workplace of the future, we need to consider it needs to empower and inspire people to do their best work. And you know what we used to do face to face, or even in a classroom setting, can now, which has had maybe 5 to 10 people, for example, in one particular room flying in, for example, can now be done with 20 or 30 people all across the world, for example. Yeah, and these type of classroom trainings and virtual learnings and prerequisite learnings can be put in place, and can, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, can be a set standard for companies globally.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, I come from a generation where, you know, trust is good, but control is better. Are we sort of moving in the complete opposite direction now? That, you know, forget about control. Trust is good because it will show up in your performance whether you are worthy of our trust. Is that where we're heading?
I think, yeah, and the answer to that is possibly yes. From the experience that I've had working with a number of graduates recently on various placements, is that there seems to be a next generation of younger people that want to do development, but they want to do it bite size. There seems to be a real quest for work experience, but not in the old way of doing it. It's work experience that's smart. CILT themselves, International, have had a couple of placements working on real life projects, which have given students a real insight, but we've only met face to face once, you know. So I think there is a real opportunity that it doesn't need to be year-long experiential learning, but the ability for professional bodies, employers, and the education sector to kind of work together with almost a new look placement approach is probably something I think we're going to see post-COVID.
Good. I think we're running out of time now.
I want to add one last sentence. Sorry, Jan. You know, the question that you had about trust, you know, I mean, you know, you look at the world today, you look at the information that's being shared, the fact that we are so we have information at our fingertips. So why, you know, if we were able to you know, look at each other on Facebook and have webinars and Instagram, et cetera, we're already in each other's backyard. So we have to trust each other.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You say you do one learning, I would know that you've done the learning via the internet, for example, because that would be just your name would be registered there. We can go that deep into that type of granularity.
Yeah. Good point. No, thanks, Arnoud. Good point, and I think a very good way to sort of end this webinar. John, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, no worries. So thank you everybody so much for all your time and attention, and some really excellent questions. You can see basically some thoughts for you to go away with. There's some key messages that have come out today, but here are just some really critical ones for everyone to reflect on. That upskilling, reskilling and refreshing is something every organization is going to have to do now and post-COVID. There's a key message, which is now is not the time to press delete on training and skills development. It doesn't have to cost the earth, and it can be done smartly, but pressing delete will cause a bow wave of skills gaps and deficiencies for the next 5 years if we are not careful. Also, people that are skilled and capable are normally chameleons. They can move, they can change, and they can learn new skills quickly. And finally, there's really a bit of responsibility for us as an institute to really look at how we respond and reshape this arena. But there's also a responsibility for you as individuals, I guess, to self-develop and to be smart and effective in your own way. And so with that, I'm going to say a huge thank you to all the panelists for giving up their time today. Jan, thanks for piloting us through and for the panel discussion. And I think this will be something that hopefully we can leverage off, build the relationships and use the evidence that's been presented today to really help us move forward this year. Thank you so much indeed, everyone, for joining. We're going to close the webinar now, but if anyone has any last minute comments, web links or anything, please just pop them in the chat so that we've got them there before we shut. And thank you very much once again.